We need to start really understanding the difference between quality and what we can quantify. Even the color itself can absorb into your perception and affect you on a very deep molecular level. So there's so much about the sensuality of food, how it was prepared, who you're sharing it with, that is going to affect its, quote, nutritional content. In fact, there's the vitamin P concept of pleasure itself having such a profoundly beneficial effect on your body. And that's far beyond what science can tell us. So food is sacred. And when you really look at the etymology itself, it's fascinating. All these modern languages boil back down to the Indo-European proto-language that no one knows has an example of it existing, but it was the mother tongue. It's like this tree. And the word health literally connects to three words. It's whole, holy, sacred, and to heal. So, that's where you get things like the Eucharist. This is true, is that, there's something about nutrition that can bring us right back to that awareness that there isn't this differentiation. This isn't just food, a bunch of atoms. This is connected deeply and should be to spirituality, and it can help make us whole, assuming we get the right kind of food. I think that this was happening as the science is kind of now leading us to that point where it's almost like a religious experience. I mean, I think about the protein folding mystery, and it's just kind of amazing, to think that this exists and that it embodies so much complexity and information. And yet it's a single thing that I could eat. Even the word nutrition comes from the root nourish to suckle. And when you think about that original act, okay, you're born, and there's no separation between the deepest intimacy that a human can experience and the moment of nourishing. And when you think about this, what I've always thought is, you think about the placebo effect, oftentimes lactose was used as a placebo. And can you imagine the epigenetic imprinting of the birth moment, where the first experience of being born into a crazy world in theory, if it was a natural birth with water, maybe it wasn't that way, but then you get this experience of the breast, the nourishment, the mother, and lactose. So could that be why the placebo effect is so powerful in certain instances? Because you're getting a sugar pill. It's not poisoning you, because with the actual treatment group, they give you a poison in the pharmaceutical model. So no wonder they have to control for the placebo for there to even be the sort of political construct of evidence-based medicine. Because it's a very presumptuous term. The evidence of my experience is more compelling, the N of 1, than any kind of randomized, double-blind, multi-center, placebo-controlled trial from Cleveland Clinic, which is just owned by Big Pharma on some level. Okay, some people are not going to like what I just said, but I think it's true. So this is something to think about, is when we think about nutrition, it does really tie back to these basic human experiences that are very sacred. Okay. Yeah, that's potentially one of Monsanto, their future plants, the last one standing, as everything on the planet has been destroyed by their chemical model. Kind of a depressing image. Okay. So the food quality issues help us to understand one thing, is you can't just go shop at, hopefully you're not doing this anyway too much, Whole Foods, and think that you're just buying your organic food and you're going to protect yourself from what's going on, like this luxuriating concept that we can hermetically seal ourselves off from what's occurring outside. Because at this point in time, there is no going back when it comes to biopollution. Jeffrey can talk deeply on this, of course, but it's almost a form of rape. In fact, Vandana Shiva used that term in terms of what happens when a GMO plant actually sends off pollen and then infects a non-GMO neighboring plot with these genetically modified proteins. Obviously, you can't be undone, and there will be no organic in the future because of that. That's the vision that is inevitable. I do believe there's a way maybe that we could somehow undo it with technology that hasn't even been envisioned before. I'm a fan of Tesla. If you look into his work, you'll realize almost anything is possible. Even Paul Stammen with using mushrooms to degrade the BP oil spill within 3 weeks, producing, in theory, an edible mushroom is just amazing. But what we're seeing now is the death of our planet. I mean, that's definitely not sensationalistic talk. It's just the reality of what is actually happening in this model and how it infects every single neighboring non-GMO or organic plot. You can't undo it. So it should never have been approved for that reason, and that's why we shouldn't be talking about labeling. I mean, yes, there's some legitimacy to that, but you've seen many defeats, and it's really about banning GMOs, and especially when you understand what glyphosate is and how it contaminates every single plant that it's used in, you realize that we're all being poisoned, and we're smiling about it and not doing anything about it, but it's really scary. So, this is just a map of the proteome of a particular seed, actually. I think that is oats. But it's just showing you just a visualization of just how complex things are. But what I wanted to point out is that food has meaningful information, okay? It's intelligent. It's not just overwhelming, because sometimes the way I talk about it, I even get confused and overwhelmed. And you see certain poetry in nature. The law of signatures right here. Isn't that fascinating? The walnut and the cranium and the two hemispheres and their omega-3 fatty acid rich, which is very good for the brain, of course, and there's also neuroprotective compounds they've identified now that prevent amyloid plaque formation. Or look at the flowering plant, the pomegranate. It's the ovary of the pomegranate bush, and it literally looks like an ovary, and it can replace the ovary. In the very wicked vivisection-based model of experimental science, they use ovarectomy. They pull out the ovaries of the animal, and they induce a fast-paced osteoporosis, depression, all the things that come with perimenopause, menopause. They give one group pomegranate, and it's as if they never took out the ovaries. And it actually has estrone. It's the largest concentration of bioidentical estrone in a plant discovered. So is that just a coincidence? That's God, nature, that's poetry, and it's just right there in our face. But of course, we're not going to understand it using present models of science and nutrition. I think, again, we have to acknowledge the intelligence. And I'll go further, and when I show you turmeric, you'll understand what I'm saying. Compassion embedded in nature. So a really famous study came out in Chinese subjects where they fed them, it was rice, and they found that these little non-coding RNAs, microRNAs, within foods can go into the subject's bodies, be absorbed into their blood, and start modulating the genes, specifically liver genes related to the LDL receptor. So we now see, too, how clearly, again, the information is passed horizontally from what we eat. And there's no drug that can do this without disrupting hundreds of different pathways. This is food that is able to do this. And it won't ever be produced, I believe, either with fancy nutraceuticals. This was a very powerful article that came out last year. And this was the one where the nanoparticles, these little 10 to 100 nanometer wide spherical particles, are present within all cells. So you're eating an apple, and it contains these little spheres, and they contain these RNAs and different building blocks that have information, proteins and lipids. And they're capable of going into the body. They looked at ginger, they looked at grapefruit, those are the main ones, and downregulate all of these pathways that are related to inflammation. So they're called exosomes. So again, such a powerful new field of research is opening up, showing us the very mechanism by which foods, well, we are food, we know that, but how they completely are able to do what no drug can do. This is my favorite one. I spent 4 or 5 months just trying to index curcumin turmeric research. And at that time, there were only about 4,500 articles. This was like 2009. Now there's about 7,200. And this helps people to understand what I mean by intelligence and compassion within food, is that this is a retinoblastoma cell, a type of pretty much neurological cancer. And what they did is they administered some curcumin within this living cell petri dish. What they found was it was able to downregulate 903 genes, its expression, and then upregulate 1,319. So it's a profound fact that something as simple as just curcumin has that much intelligence that it's able to select in a meaningful way vast amounts of potential genes, and then just like this compassionate hand doing magic, able to. So what happened is that that cell was able to regress and no longer be cancer. So it was able to do the, impossible according to the conventional view of what cancer is. And so, let me see, do I have this image? Yes. So this is what came to mind. It was almost like this Hindu goddess with the many hands, because over the years, after doing this elaborate indexing project, I found over 170 now different pharmacological pathways, I call them, could call them physiological actions, that curcumin's been shown to articulate. So intelligent ways. So like if you have polymyalgia rheumatica, some new syndrome actually related to statin-induced poisoning, interleukin-6 is upregulated. It's an inflammatory compound. And so curcumin, we've indexed like about 10, 15 studies on it, downregulating interleukin-6. So there's very specific ways that it does its magic, but in some cases, it's going to do the opposite. It might downregulate a certain type of hypertension, and if you have low blood pressure, upregulate it, that adaptogenic intelligent quality. So it was known in Sanskrit as the yellow one. It was the one whose face is light and shining. It was known as a golden goddess of compassion. And so we're coming back to ancient wisdom in a new way, because what the research, when you really look at it, is saying is that this is basically an intelligent being that is capable of fixing things that really shouldn't even be fixable, and can do it down on a molecular level. And that's because, again, food has massive amounts of information as well as intelligence, and again, compassion. This is the one plant that, according to my indexing, over 630 diseases it's been shown to mitigate, prevent, or undo, based on, a lot of it's not clinical, because you're never going to see someone fund a trial on a non-patented substance like this, but it's